Hello everyone, welcome to the new video from the classical games series. Today we will be looking at a game between Alekhine and Tartakower, played in 1927. So let's jump straight to the business. Alekhine was white and he opened the game with e4 and Tartakower replied with c6. As most of you know, this is called the Karo-Khan defense, named after two players one of them had the last name Karo and the other was Khan. They were doing some research on this opening a long time ago. Okay, so usually it starts like this, and now black should take on e4 and get rid of the tension in the center. Okay, white has to recapture and knight f6. And here the best move is to take on f6, of course, and damage the pawn structure of a black player, where black has two replies. He can either go with the e-pawn for fast development, or he can take with the g-pawn for a more sharp position, because as you can see, the pawn structure is very asymmetrical and it leads to sharp positions. But okay, Alekhine chose to go back with his knight, and this move looks suboptimal, but probably Alekhine wanted to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. I guess since he was a very strong player in calculation and creativity, and his imagination was very strong, so sometimes he just played suboptimal moves and they just worked for him if the position was complex enough. Okay, Tartakower hit him with e5. There was a game before this between Alekhine and Capablanca, in which Capablanca used this move to simplify the position. So probably Tartakower was aware of this previous game and he striked with the same weapon. Okay, knight f3, and now he takes in the center. Now Alekhine took with the knight. He could also take with the queen and go into something like this, where he has a little bit of an development edge, which might turn into something more, but it is definitely more logical to take with the knight on the 7th move, so in order to keep the queens on the board. Just one more thing before this move, I forgot to tell you, it's really not good to take this pawn, because then it's not about losing the right to castle, it's about more than that. I mean, there is a threat of taking here, and this king will probably have to move, and let's say it goes here, then you can develop another piece with a tempo, and eventually black will regain his pawn and he will have a development edge. So that's why actually here after e5 white continued with knight f3. Okay, so we were here, and now bishop c5, developing with a tempo, which makes sense. If, for example, white would protect this knight with the bishop like this, which looks logical, then black would not do a typical move in these spots, which is knight g4. This move looks logical because it attacks the bishop, and if the bishop moves somewhere, the knight will drop. But here white has a really beautiful move, that actually gives him the decisive advantage. So the knight opens up the path for the light square for the dark square bishop to attack this one, and at the same time attacks the queen. If this knight is taken, then the bishop will be taken, and white just won a pawn. How about if we include an in-between move like a check? And now again, if you take this knight, you will take your bishop, and white is just a pawn up. And if you take white's bishop, then the surprise comes. Because of the position of the white's knight, this rook actually delivers a checkmate. Therefore, we'll just go back a little bit. Here, it would not be good to go knight g4, but instead it would be good to go knight d5. And now this knight is threatening to take on e3 and totally destroy the white's pawn structure, and also win the bishop pair for black. So this would be really a good position for the black player. So that's why the move bishop e3 would not be good. So white continued with queen e2 check. And if you look at this move, at first sight, it looks like it blocks the f1 bishop, which is true, but we put the queen on e2 with a check, and also white is probably going to castle queenside, so it's not so important to develop this bishop so fast. Although we will develop it very soon, but okay. And now black is in check, and he has to do something about that. He cannot block with this bishop, because if he goes to e6, white is just going to take it, and it's going to be a pawn for free. He could block he could block with the queen, but then after we exchange queens and go with this knight to f5, it looks like black is in some trouble. This bishop is attacked, although it is defended, but it is still attacked, and this pawn is attacked. And if you castle, then this bishop drops. So basically, black will probably have to go back with the bishop, or to move the king. But if he goes back with the bishop, he just loses more time, and white is already a little bit ahead in development. So this advantage might become overwhelming. Also, if you exchange one of these pieces, let's say like this, now you still have the same problem, and also now white has an advantage of the bishop pair in an open position. And what is important is that this d5 square, which looks like an outpost for this knight, can be controlled by white's c4 pawn. So this is a clear advantage for white. Probably that's why black declined from blocking with the queen, and he went for bishop back to e7. Now this queen is still attacking the knight, so something has to be done about that, and white chose to defend the knight with this bishop, because now there is no more bishop on c5. So if black would go knight d5, actually I will just show you. Let's say here, well, you can just drop back, because before there was a bishop here attacking this knight, so this move would not be possible, and now it's just not there, because the bishop is back, and knight is coming to f5, queen is coming to g4, so when this king goes to the king side, he will be under heavy attack of white's pieces. Okay, but here a good move was to, for example, castle, and let's say white would castle queen side. Now there is a rook lined up against the queen, so the queen would probably run away and attack this pawn. So let's say you protect it with the king, and let's say you go knight d5. And this is a really playable position. So black could go like this, but he decided to try to keep the white king in the center with the move c5. What do I mean with the statement to keep the white king in the center? Well, black's idea is when this knight moves, the d file will be cleared, and then the king will not be able to castle queenside because you cannot castle over the attacked square. So that's why he made this move. But this move actually loses time. It helps white move his pieces towards the enemy. So as you can see, you pushed your pawn, but you didn't gain much, and you pushed white's knight towards yourself. So it's not that great of a move. Also, this pawn is now hanging. If it would be white's turn, he could just take it because the bishop cannot retake, because once you take this pawn, you open up the e-file for your queen and you're pinning this bishop. That's why black castle, so now white cannot take the pawn because there is no more pin on the e-file. But white can do something else. What is that? It still involves this c5 pawn, and it is this move. So with this move, the c5 pawn is now attacked twice, with the queen and with the bishop. So that's a clear threat to take a pawn. That's why black has to do something. And let's say he protects it. That looks like strong protection. Then, okay, white will not castle queenside, but he put the rook on the open file. This queen is having hard time finding a good square. Probably she will go to c7, but after that white will just develop, okay, castle on the short side, and look at these pieces. They're all like 4 light pieces and the queen and very soon rook, they're all looking at this king. So probably it would be a hard position for black player as well. But instead of this b6 move, he chose a little bit better move, and that is rook e8. So he is defending this c pawn tactically. How is that? Well, if you take this pawn now, let's say with the bishop, that would be really a bad move, because now when we take the bishop, we open up the rook and give the check at the same time, and all of a sudden black is winning. That's why white didn't take on c5, but instead he developed one more piece, bishop to d3, looking towards this king, and now he's ready to castle on either side, and in the future this pawn will be hanging, and the queen will maybe swing to the king side. Also, I just want to tell you one thing. It's not that white wants to take this pawn at all costs. It is just that he is using it to gain time. Like if you remember, black had to lose some time to take extra care of this guy, and that's where white gained even more lead in development. So if you remember, he had to play this move in order to prepare the discovered attack, and now very soon he will have to play another move to take care of the c5 pawn, and in the meantime white is just developing piece by piece, and if you look now, he already has all his 4 light pieces out and the queen, and black only has a bishop and knight out and a rook, so that's already a big lead in development. Now a good move for black would be bishop f8 to put this, to tuck this bishop away, protect some squares, open up the rook, and hope for the best. Actually, you could play this way, but black was too worried about this guy, and he was thinking to develop this bishop either here or here, so that's why he played b6. it looks like a good move. Maybe you can put your bishop here, or maybe even here, and attack the white's queen and exchange this guy. So it looks very appealing, but there is a problem with it. White castle, and this move is very good. It doesn't only remove the king from the center and from this rook in the future, but also sets up white's rook against black queen. So imagine if at this point this bishop could, let's say, move here with the check and open up the d file. Then white would just win a queen. It's that simple. So that is basically white's idea, but black wasn't careful enough and he attacked white's queen. Instead, maybe he should have tried something like this. Exchange. Now the queen is attacked, so the queen will probably move. And it's still a very good attack for white, but better than losing by force like in the game. So he went here, and now comes the combination. If you want, you can pause the video and try to find this cute combination. It's not so simple because at the end of the combination there is one more move that is maybe not so obvious at the first sight. Okay, I'll be quiet for a few seconds and I'll see you then. Okay, I don't know if you were successful in finding the solution to this combination, but I will show you anyway. It starts with knight h6 check. What is the point of this move? Well, the point is to open this diagonal for the d3 bishop so that it can sacrifice itself and pick up this queen. If black doesn't take the knight, he can either go to f8 or to h8. So if he goes to f8, it's very simple. You just deliver the checkmate. And if he goes to h8, he will also get checkmated, but in a more beautiful way. White can give a check, and now white can give what we call a discover check, because at the same time the queen is attacking the king and the knight. So if he goes to f8, mate is on f7, and if he goes to h8, then the beautiful smattered mate appears on the board. So therefore black has no options. He really has to take this knight. That's his only way. But now, as you can see, the g file has opened and this diagonal has opened. So the bishop can sacrifice himself with a check. And that way he will actually open up the rook, so the queen is hanging. Okay, so black took with the knight. But let's see what would happen if he would take, if he would remove his king to the side. In that case, white would just take on f7, so note that the queen is hanging, and when you do something about this queen, then let's say you move your queen here, then all of a sudden this knight comes in and it's really hard to defend this position. There is a mate threatened on g7. If this bishop moves down to protect the g7 square, then the knight drops, and it's really hard to see any defense here. So that would be what would happen if black moved his king. Also, if the king goes here, then just bishop h6 mate. And if it goes here, if nothing else, we can put the queen to f4, attack this guy, and still attack the queen. I mean, remove the queen from being attacked and make another threat. But okay, black took with the knight, and now you cannot take this queen because then, so I will show you, if you take the queen, then black will just take your queen and you are lost. So that's why you have to do something about your queen before you take his queen. So what you do, you give a check here, and once black deals with the check, well, now you take his queen. And now if you look, white has given a rook, a bishop, and a knight for the queen. And that is really a lot of material. And if the situation would stay that way, then actually black would be winning. But there is one small problem for black, and for white it's not a problem, it's opposite of the problem. So it's a solution. Queen e4, it could also go to f3, doesn't matter. The point is, this queen is attacking this guy, and there is really no way to stop the queen from getting there unless you want to sacrifice one piece, either this knight or this bishop. So it was very important to see this move all the way here, because when Alekhine played long castle, he was supposed to see what would happen after bishop a6, and he had to see all these moves. So one by one they are not so hard, but you had to see them all in advance. So that's why this is really a pretty combination. Okay, so now black, his rook is hanging, and also this bishop is hanging, and everything is hanging. Almost everything is hanging. So he decided to give up this knight, so to save both of his bishops. Okay, white took the knight, and now this guy is attacked. So black dropped back to protect it. And if you would be now greedy, you could even take this pawn. But white decided to first bring more pieces into the attack. So he wants all his pieces to play, except this guy, but okay, most of his pieces. So black went here, trying to bring this guy into the fight, but now white just took, and you cannot take on h6, because if you take, then the queen will come there, and it's really hard to stop a mate here. You can do it temporarily, but then either the activation of the rook will decide, or let me see, probably the activation of the rook would be the best. So you could actually take on h6, but it would not end up too well. Probably just moving the rook on h3 and pressuring h7 would be enough. Anyway, after this move, black decided to nudge this queen. And since now the knight is here protecting this guy, the queen doesn't have to stay on the 6th rank. So he moved it down, he was attacked again, and he moved it again. And now when black comes to c6, and what this does is, this allows white to take on f8, and after rook takes, there is a problem with this bishop. If you would take with a knight, then after this check, there is a threat of mate here, so you have to block. Something like this would put black into total lost position. There is a threat of g7 mate, the rook is hanging, and it's not so clear how black is going to defend that. If he goes here, we just pick up this guy. So let's go back. That's why here he took with the rook, but now, as I said, this bishop has a problem, so black had to block the check with the knight to protect the bishop, otherwise just loses the bishop. But now comes another nice move, knight d6, cutting this rook from defense of this knight. And if you go, for example, king g7, then after queen g5, check, this knight will drop, because wherever kings goes, the queen will just pick up the knight. So that was the game between Alekhine and Tartakower. It showed how great player Alekhine was. He has even better games, but in this game we can see that even from a position that looked pretty simple, he managed to find a really creative combination and to foresee it a long time beforehand in order to achieve the win. I hope you enjoyed this video and see you around.